Penguin Random House Audio presents The Blueprint, LeBron James, Cleveland's Deliverance, and the Making of the Modern NBA. By Jason Lloyd. Read for you by James Patrick Cronin. For Alessia, Alexander, AJ, and Ava Maria, I love you. For Mom and Dad, thank you for working so hard every day, so I never had to. Preface. As a boy growing up in the west suburbs of Cleveland, I cried the day Michael Jordan eliminated the Cavs from the NBA playoffs on The Shot. I sat in the hollow, decrepit Cleveland Municipal Stadium on countless summer nights and cheered for anonymous Indians teams filled with guys like Pat Tabler, Ken Schramm, Corey Snyder, Brett Butler, Tom Candiotti, and Ernie Camacho. Celebrating championships was never a realistic expectation. Just being there had to suffice. Over time, I came to expect sports collapses and magnificent disasters, so it wasn't much of a surprise when the Indians blew Game 7 of the World Series in 1997, or when the Browns took losing to an all-new level and the city lost the franchise in 1995. In Cleveland, devastation and heartbreak are just another food group. It's part of the terms of the deal when you root for these teams. I never had much interest in sticking around these parts after college, and while I had plenty of opportunities to move away, I never did. That's what made covering the 2015 through 16 Cavs season such an honor and privilege. From the time LeBron James returned to Cleveland in 2014, I have been by his side chronicling every step of the journey. First for the Akron Beacon-Journal, and now for The Athletic. I was there the summer night a capacity crowd at Akron's Infocision Stadium welcomed home their prodigal son. I was there the night he sat in the locker room, devastated, with a towel over his face for nearly an hour after the Cavs lost the NBA Finals to the Golden State Warriors in 2015. And most importantly, I was here for the 4 years he wasn't. While James was off in Miami winning championships for the Heat, I was watching the Cavs painfully construct a daring plan to try to win him back. It involved a lot of losing, a lot of money, and a lot of luck. They made mistakes along the way, but ultimately, 2016 will be remembered as Cleveland's greatest sports year in more than 50 years. I'm the only one who has covered the Cavs every day, home and road, from the time James left until the day he returned. The Blueprint is a culmination of that 4-year plan. A boy coming home to fulfill a promise, and a city shedding its loser mentality to rise in glory. I hope you'll enjoy reading it as much as I enjoyed living it. Introduction. There, on the floor of his office, on a perfect summer morning, a grown man collapsed alone on his hands and knees in both joy and terror as the television hummed behind him. The lights inside cavernous Cleveland Clinic courts were mostly dim. The court was darkened, and the basketballs had been put away after an exhausting 2013 through 14 season, when the Cleveland Cavaliers were again among the worst teams in the NBA. All the years of planning, the meticulous preparation for the summer of 2014, and a team's future seemed to disintegrate in the fire of another crushing season. With most of his staff in Las Vegas and the temperature in Cleveland hovering in the low 80s, David Griffin, the Cavaliers GM, milled around his office in jeans, a golf shirt, and flip-flops with the television on ESPN and the volume low. It was July 11th, 2014. And the rush of NBA free agency was essentially over. All of the marquee names had agreed to new contracts except one. The biggest one. The Diamond Jewel. 4 years after leaving Cleveland in a rubble of smoke and ashes, LeBron James had the opportunity to go home. Unbeknownst to almost everyone, certainly to the fans, the Cavs had spent all of James's 4 years in Miami working tirelessly to bring him home, and to provide him with a fresh chance at ending Cleveland's long championship drought. But no one had any idea whether the plan would work. The final preparations had begun 2 weeks earlier. It was Dan Gilbert's turn first. 4 years ago, Gilbert had eviscerated James and his decision to play for Miami in a blistering letter, and the two men hadn't spoken face-to-face since. If James was going to come back, Gilbert knew he was going to have to apologize. Gilbert requested a meeting with James in the early days of free agency in July 2014, then secretly flew to Miami, hoping to meet his former star one-on-one. But when Gilbert arrived, James had the house full of his friends and business associates. He wasn't going to make this easy, not after all the names Gilbert had called him in that letter. Gilbert walked in, clearly outnumbered. Still, he apologized for the blistering comments he'd written in the hours after the decision, James's hour-long television show announcing his decision to leave Cleveland for Miami. James apologized, too, for the spectacle of the television show and the way he left town. The two men managed to glue back together some pieces of their long-fractured relationship, but Gilbert stepped back on his plane and flew home with no promises, no assurance that James was returning. Griffin remained pessimistic throughout the free agency process. Would LeBron even want to come home? The Cavs had the worst cumulative record in the league the 4 years he was away, and were coming off another miserable season of failed expectations, locker room dysfunction, and more turnover in the front office and coaching staff. They'd just hired a little-known coach from the other side of the world in David Blatt, who had no NBA experience. In Griffin's best-case scenario, James would return to Miami on a 1-year contract, giving the Cavs a little more time to put their house in order. And if they met expectations in 2014 through 15, if they could contend for a playoff spot with a young roster and new coach, Griffin surmised that maybe they'd have a real chance at luring him home the following summer. Griffin also knew he wasn't the only suitor. 3 days after his secret meeting with Gilbert, James met with Heat president Pat Riley in Las Vegas. Riley had been the one who traveled to Cleveland in 2010 and convinced James to leave home and take less money to come to South Beach and win championships as part of a Big Three. Now he was chasing James into the desert, begging him to stay and see the plan through. But Riley left Vegas without a deal in place. James wasn't going to another new city and starting over again. He was either staying in South Beach or going home. James's agent, Rich Paul, called Griffin during the early morning hours of July 11th to discuss personnel moves and the flexibility the Cavs had to add talent around James if he returned. Paul wanted a blueprint of how the Cavs could surround him with the pieces necessary to win. But he never hinted that James was actually coming. Griffin, still refusing to believe they were serious about returning, went back to work. On that July morning, Griffin returned to milling around his office inside Cleveland Clinic Courts, the Cavs' $25 million practice facility, which was built in 2007 and spans 50,000 square feet of offices. It includes a weight room, hot and cold tubs, and 17,000 feet of basketball courts in suburban Independence. The fact that it was constructed just off Interstate 77, a short drive from James's palace in nearby Bath Township, is no coincidence. Griffin sat in his office lining up a worst-case scenario in the likely event James was staying in Miami. The Cavs liked Gordon Hayward, but he was long gone. So were Chandler Parsons and Channing Frye. All of the free agents Griffin thought could fit this group had agreed to offers elsewhere. If James didn't come home, the Cavs would be left with a young team, a glut of cap space, and no one worthy of it. There was no next step on the board, Griffin said. Griffin had joined the Cavs' front office in 2000.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?